The raw December air crept under her old coat, and Ellie tried to wrap herself even tighter in her grandmother's worn wool scarves. The snow, barely dusting the roadside, melted as soon as it landed. Her feet had long since gone numb in the cheap, leaky boots. But she couldn't leave. Granny had made it perfectly clear it was better not to come home without any money. The girl straightened the neat pyramid of jars filled with pickled cabbage and gherkins on the rickety wooden board. Expensive foreign cars kept pulling in and out of the parking lot, their polished sides gleaming. Ellie spotted a distinguished man in a cashmere coat. He was in a hurry, a strong jaw, a confident stride, an expensive watch on his wrist. Gathering her courage, Ellie called out softly as he passed by. "Sir, would you like to buy some? Homemade cabbage, lightly salted cucumbers, nice and crispy." The rich man didn't pay any attention. He walked past, speaking tensely into his phone. Suddenly he sped up, jogged over to a car parked nearby, slammed the door, and started the engine. The powerful vehicle swerved sharply out of its parking spot and rolled backward, heading straight for the frightened vendor. Ellie didn't even have time to cry out. She just squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact. There was a sickening crunch of crushed glass. A wave of hot exhaust fumes hit her face. Brine splattered in all directions, soaking the hem of her coat and her boots. The vendor lost her balance and tumbled awkwardly backward off her wobbly stool. Opening her eyes, Ellie saw something terrible. The pyramid of jars had vanished under the massive wheel, turned into a muddy mess. The driver jumped out of his car. His face was deathly pale, his movements jerky and frantic. In 2 bounds, he was at the boot, checking the bumper, then staring at the slush of crushed glass and mangled cucumbers under the tires. And finally, he looked at Ellie. She was lying on her back, unable to move, her hands stretched out in front of her, as if shielding herself from certain death. "What were you doing, throwing yourself under my wheels?" he shouted in a strained voice, looming over her. "I," was all the frightened vendor could manage, struggling to get up. The man frantically patted the pockets of his coat, pulled out a wallet, and glanced inside. "No cash," he said, the words tumbling out. "Look, I don't have time. I'm not going to a cash point. I'm running late. Here, take my card. The address is on it. Come by tomorrow and I'll pay for everything." He nervously held out a glossy rectangle with gold embossing, but Ellie just frowned and didn't take it. "I don't have a phone," she said, her voice trembling as tears welled up. "My gran will kill me if I come home with nothing." "You've ruined everything, smashed it all." The man paused for a moment, looking into her tear-streaked eyes, at her face wrapped in several old scarves. For a moment he seemed to hesitate, as if weighing a choice, and then, as if making a desperate decision, grabbed her by the elbow and pulled her towards the car. "Get in now! I don't have time to stand here with you." He practically shoved her into the car. Jumping into the driver's seat, he turned to her. "What's your name, anyway? So I know what to call you." "Ellie!" she nearly yelled, her voice shaking as she gave in to his panic, pressing herself into the soft leather seat. "Sit still and don't touch anything. We'll get there and figure out what to do with you." He slammed his foot on the accelerator. Ellie heard the old stool splinter under the heavy tire. The car tore out of the parking lot and onto the road. They sped down the highway, overtaking traffic, while Ellie sat looking around like a frightened animal, afraid to move. Soon they turned off the main road and after a few more minutes, stopped in front of a metal gate. Killing the engine, the man jumped out and called, "Stay with me!" They hurried into the spacious hall of a large modern house where it was warm and smelled pleasantly of home cooking. A worried-looking elderly woman in a neat apron rushed towards them. She must have been the housekeeper. Her face was twisted with fear. "James Harrington, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice trembling. "Little Chloe is very unwell." The man didn't stop to take off his coat, rushing up the wooden staircase. Ellie, told not to fall behind, followed closely. In the children's bedroom, filled with toys, a girl of about 10 lay on the bed. She was pale as a sheet, her lips tinged with blue. A young nurse knelt beside her, wiping the girl's face with a wet wipe in trembling hands. Several open bottles sat on the bedside table. "I don't know how this happened," the nurse said, turning to the newcomers. "What did you give her?" Harrington roared, grabbing her by the shoulder. You're a professional. You have a diploma? I, I got confused. The bottles look alike, the woman stammered. I've already called an ambulance. They're on their way. The master of the house frantically grabbed his phone and started calling someone. Where are you, damn it? The child is barely responding. Hurry up. He paced the room, leaning over his daughter. The ambulance is coming. Hang on, Chloe Bear, hang on. Daddy's here. Someone pushed Ellie in the back, and the girl stepped into the room. Her eyes fell on the bottle, then on the nurse, who could only tremble, shrinking back into a corner. Poisoned, she thought, and suddenly remembered how her strict grandmother had once treated her after she'd eaten some wild berries in the forest. Water! Her voice rang out sharply, cutting through Harrington's panic. She turned to the housekeeper frozen in the doorway. Get warm water, lots of it, put some salt in it, and a basin. Quickly! The housekeeper gasped and disappeared, returning within a minute with a large jug and a basin. Step aside, sir! Ellie brusquely pushed the stunned man aside with her shoulder. The next 10 minutes became a fight for life. The girl moved with confidence, while the others stared in frightened disbelief. She lifted Chloe and, supporting her head, began to make her drink. The girl resisted weakly, whimpering, but Ellie was relentless. Come on, sweetheart, just a little more, she said in a steady voice. The world around her disappeared. All that existed was this pale, lifeless little face and the gulping breaths. When the jug was empty, Ellie leaned the girl over the basin and, before anyone could react, decisively put 2 fingers in her mouth. The girl retched, once, twice. The nurse turned away, covering her face. Harrington sank into a chair, frozen. The procedure had to be repeated once more until clear water came up. Chloe cried out one last time and went limp in Ellie's arms. The frightening pallor slowly began to fade. After a few tense minutes, her cheeks flushed pink and her breathing became deeper and steadier. At that moment, heavy footsteps and voices echoed in the hall. The master of the house jumped up from his chair. The elderly paramedic entered the room and quickly assessed the situation. The listless girl in bed, the open medicine bottles, the empty jug in Ellie's hands, the basin, the frightened people. He examined Chloe, checked her pulse, and turned to her father. Who performed the lavage? He asked, adjusting his glasses. She did, Harrington said, pointing to Ellie. The paramedic gave the girl a surprised look, taking in her shabby clothes, which contrasted sharply with the clean, wealthy surroundings. Well done. You did exactly the right thing. If you'd waited for us, we might not have made it in time. That's a heavy drug. Another half hour, and her kidneys would have failed. As it is, she'll be fine. I'll give her an injection now. She needs to rest. Harrington slowly sat back down. He looked from his daughter to the ragged girl. She stood there, clutching the empty jug, blinking. After the paramedic finished his paperwork and left, the master of the house sat motionless, his eyes fixed on his daughter. His face, contorted with panic moments before, was now a frozen mask. The nurse took a timid step forward, trying to explain. Mr. Harrington, I didn't mean any harm. The bottles were right next to each other. The light was dim. I was so frightened. The man slowly turned his head towards her. His gaze was cold and empty, more frightening than anger. You're fired, he said quietly. Get out. I want you gone in 5 minutes. The woman, with a sob, almost ran out of the room. Harrington covered his face with his hands. Only now did a violent tremor begin to shake him, the delayed reaction to the horror he'd just lived through. The housekeeper gently touched Ellie's shoulder. Come on, dear, come with me. Let's get you out of these wet things, and you need to eat. In the hallway, as the housekeeper helped her peel off the worn-out clothes, Harrington appeared. His phone was buzzing insistently in his pocket. He glanced nervously at his watch. Margaret, listen carefully, he said hurriedly. I can't miss today. I have meetings I can't cancel. You're in charge, but don't worry. I'll be keeping an eye on the house. I can see everything on my phone through the cameras. He nodded curtly at Ellie. Look after Alexandra. Run her a bath, find her some clean clothes, get her something to eat. Wait until I get back. I'll sort everything out this evening. Call me if anything happens. Already fastening his coat as he walked, he paused for a second to look at the ragged girl, then rushed out of the house. Ellie stood alone in the middle of a stranger's home. Well, don't just stand there, you poor thing. Margaret said kindly. Come on, while Chloe is asleep, we need to get you sorted. You're shaking like a leaf. The guest was led to a cozy bathroom on the ground floor and given a towel. For the girl, this place felt like paradise. She sat in a real bathtub filled with thick, fragrant bubbles. The hot water gradually washed away the ingrained grime and the sticky fear that had haunted her constantly. She looked at her red, chapped hands and couldn't believe this blessing was happening to her. Half an hour later, changed into clean, soft clothes, Ellie sat in the kitchen. Margaret placed a bowl of hot soup and a mug of tea with honey in front of her. You're so thin. Eat up. You did such a wonderful thing today. Mr. Harrington, he's a good man, really, but losing his wife broke him. He lives for that little one now. And that nurse, she waved her hand. I wish I'd never laid eyes on her. Came with all her diplomas, but no heart and no sense. Ellie ate quickly, mostly in silence. The man's words about cameras echoed in her mind. She'd noticed them in some corners near the ceiling and felt a little uneasy, knowing she might be watched. What's wrong with Chloe? Ellie asked, finishing her soup. A heart condition. The poor thing tires so easily. She can't run, jump, or get too upset. It makes her breathless and pale, Margaret sighed. The rest of the day, Ellie spent in Chloe's room after the girl woke up. They chatted. Ellie marveled at the abundance of toys, while the girl was fascinated by her stories. Tell me something about real life, not from a book, Chloe asked. Ellie sighed, stroking the impossibly soft blanket. There was this little dog at the market once. They called her Scruff, a tiny little thing, reddish-brown with a torn ear. A real mess on skinny legs. She joined the pack that hung around the butcher stalls. Chloe held her breath and Ellie continued, staring into the distance. She was scared there. The pack was mean, strong. When they threw bones, the little one didn't even dare go near them. The big ones would chase her off right away or grab her by the paw or the scruff to make sure she knew her place. And she did. She'd sit on the sidelines, always in the wind, watching the others eat, whimpering. Part of the pack, but always all alone. No one to stand up for her, no one to warm her. Poor thing, Chloe whispered. Where was her mom? Don't know, Ellie shrugged. Her mom was gone. I don't have a mom anymore either, Chloe said sadly. Ellie looked at the rich little girl more intently and continued. When I saw her, my heart ached for her. I started secretly feeding her. My gran is tough. She'd smack my hands if I took an extra crust of bread. She'd grumble for a week, but I still brought it. I'd give a little whistle and she'd be right there, wagging her tail, looking into my eyes. We understood each other without words. Two lost souls. What happened to her? Chloe squeezed Ellie's hand. What happens? Ellie lied, not wanting to upset the girl with the little dog's sad fate. She's waiting for me. I promised her that one day we'd leave that pack and go somewhere we wouldn't have to fight for every scrap, where no one would bite you just for existing. Around midnight, the door to the children's room creaked softly. In the strip of light from the hallway, the tall silhouette of James Harrington appeared. Ellie, who had been dozing, woke with a start. She saw the man stop in the doorway, as if afraid to take a wrong step. How is she? He whispered, approaching the bed. She's fine, Ellie whispered back. She kept asking when you'd be home. Harrington gently straightened the edge of the blanket. Let's talk, he said softly, and left the room. Ellie followed him into the living room, where Margaret was already waiting. James Harrington, Margaret began, I gave Alexandra some of your late wife's things from the boxes in the back cupboard. I hope you don't mind. Her own clothes were completely worn out. You understand? The man looked at the guest and Ellie felt awkward, as if she were wearing a life that didn't fit her. But Harrington just waved his hand wearily, almost lifelessly. Let her wear them. No point in them sitting in boxes. It's been so long. I've requested a new nurse from the agencies, but no luck yet. With the holidays coming, no one wants to take a job, he said. I can look after Chloe, Ellie said, surprising herself with her boldness. A sudden realization that she might not get another chance pushed her to a desperate act. The rich man turned his gaze to Ellie, cool and appraising. Don't you need to go home? No, the girl shook her head firmly. Shouldn't you at least let your family know? Harrington asked, looking both surprised and a little wary. You don't have a phone, do you? Give me the number. I'll call, explain where you are and why you're delayed. They must be worried sick looking for you. At these words, Ellie flinched noticeably. Please, don't call them, she said, her voice dry and brittle. I don't have parents. I live with my aunt, my father's sister, my uncle's mother, my gran. She runs things. If she finds out where I am and who I'm with, she'll do something awful. She's cunning. Let them think I stayed with a friend. Please don't give them this address. The master of the house and the housekeeper exchanged a look, but Harrington didn't press the girl. All right, he said. It's late. We'll leave it for now. Go get some sleep. Morning was clear and frosty. The puddles outside had frozen solid. Ellie, used to rising early, crept silently downstairs. In the kitchen, which opened into a spacious dining area, the housekeeper was already busy. The coffee machine hummed softly. The smell of toast filled the air. The master of the house sat at the round table, looking at a tablet. In front of him was a plate with remnants of an omelet and an empty glass. No free nurses, he said. We'll have to wait a few days. Maybe someone will become available. Margaret, without turning around, answered confidently, Don't rush, Mr. Harrington. We'll manage for now. Alexandra is clever, quiet, knows how to work. Little Chloe likes her, and she's a good soul. Noticing Ellie frozen in the doorway, Harrington said cheerfully, Ellie, good morning. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you. Your home is so warm, Ellie said, suddenly shy, not knowing what to do with her hands. At that moment, Chloe ran into the dining room. She looked stronger, with color in her cheeks. She immediately rushed to Ellie and hugged her tightly around the waist. Dad, Ellie isn't going anywhere today, is she? We didn't finish telling the story about the dog. Harrington watched this scene closely, and a flicker of gratitude crossed his eyes. Ellie, I'd like to ask you to stay with my daughter for one more day, he said, tilting his head slightly. I can see Chloe is happy with you. I'll pay you, of course, as we agreed. You won't be disappointed. It's no trouble, Ellie nodded, stroking the girl's hair. Harrington stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the exit. Margaret, I'm off. Call if anything happens. I'll be on my phone. A moment later, the sound of a car pulling away faded. The girl smiled and ruffled Chloe's hair. They sat down to breakfast together. It was around 4 in the afternoon, and darkness was already falling outside. The commotion downstairs started suddenly. Ellie, who had been reading a story to Chloe in her room, flinched at the sound of the front door slamming, loud voices and heavy footsteps on the parquet. Something shattered downstairs, and a painfully familiar rasping laugh made her heart freeze. Leaving Chloe on the bed, Ellie rushed to the stairs and froze, gripping the banister. In the hall, looking around with greedy delight, stood Uncle Vic and his 2 overgrown sons, her cousins. Now this is what I call living! The uncle spat directly onto the carpet and jerked his head towards the housekeeper, who was pressed against the wall. Grab the old hen, tie her to a chair in the kitchen, stuff something in her mouth so she doesn't scream. Margaret gasped as one of the men roughly grabbed her arms. From behind Vic, leaning on a stick, appeared Granny, her piercing gaze fixed on Ellie. Well, well, look at you, granddaughter, the old woman rasped, a snake-like smile curling on her lips. Found yourself a nice spot, a fat one. Good girl, Ellie. I knew sending you out to sell was a good idea. And what an address you've led us to. Come on, boys, get the stuff in the car. And you worthless girl, get down here and show us where the owner keeps his gold and jewels. Leave, Ellie said, her voice shaking, though she didn't move from the spot. Get out of here. There's nothing here that belongs to you. The old woman paused for a moment, her face contorting into a vicious grimace. Ellie saw that Granny realized help wouldn't be coming for them. You little snake, the old woman spat, turning against your own family. Vic, grab her and the other girl. Get them both down here. Ellie turned to run and almost collided with little Chloe. The girl had followed her out of the room and now hid behind her, terrified. Ellie reacted instantly. She grabbed Chloe's hand and pulled her back into the children's room. She slammed the door and turned the lock just as Uncle Vic crashed heavily against it from the other side. Open up, you brat, he roared, pounding his fist on the wood. Ellie pressed her back against the door, feeling it shudder with each blow. She heard the old woman's dry, muffled voice. "Leave them, Vic. Let them sit locked up in there. They're not going anywhere. The windows are too high. We'll find everything ourselves. And if we don't, the old hen in the kitchen will help us. We'll make her talk." "Come on, boys, get to work!" Footsteps pounded on the stairs. The uncle ran back down. Ellie slid to the floor, listening to the sounds of furniture being moved and things being thrown about downstairs. Chloe sat on the bed, her breathing becoming more and more labored and wheezy. "Ellie, are they going to kill us?" the girl whispered, pressing a hand to her chest as if her heart was beating erratically. Ellie rushed to her and hugged her, feeling rage boiling inside her. She was no longer afraid of Granny. She knew that what happened behind that door now would decide not only the fate of this house, but her own life too. She no longer felt like that little stray dog on the fringes of the pack. A terrifying silence fell over the children's room, broken only by Chloe's heavy, wheezing breaths. Ellie knew this wouldn't end well. Knowing her cunning Gran, she had to be prepared. So she pushed a wardrobe against the door and stood listening intently. Below, chaos reigned. The burglars weren't gentle. Heavy male footsteps approached and retreated. At one point, the noise in the hallway died down, and Ellie heard the dry, commanding voice of the old woman, who had come upstairs. "Vic, stop messing with that rubbish," she rasped. "Did you find a safe or anything valuable? There's too much trouble with this junk for what it's worth. Change of plan. We're taking the rich girl with us. Her daddy will pay a good price for that little doll." Ellie felt a shiver run down her spine. "Ellie, they're going to take me," Chloe whispered behind her, barely audible. The girl turned and saw Chloe's lips turning blue. The girl understood everything. Her eyes were wide with terror, her small hands clutching the blanket she was huddled under. "They're not going to take you," Ellie said firmly, though her own legs were shaking. "Ellie, open up!" Uncle Vic's voice roared right outside, and the door shuddered from a powerful kick. "Come out nicely, or I'll smash the frame in!" With a mighty heave, the men tore the door from its hinges. The young caregiver threw her weight against the wardrobe. She knew Chloe wouldn't survive being kidnapped. Her weak heart would simply stop in some dirty shed from the cold and fear. But despite her efforts, the wardrobe slowly slid back under the relentless pressure, and she could see the strained red faces of the men laying siege to the room. There was no time to think. She grabbed a heavy bronze figurine from the dresser and stood directly in front of the bed, shielding the girl. With a deafening crash, the wardrobe fell, and Uncle Vic burst into the room, followed by his older son. They began circling the bed, surrounding the girls. "All right, little one, playtime's over," Vic snarled, reaching his large, dirty hands towards Chloe. "Don't touch her!" Ellie lunged at him with a fury she didn't know she possessed. She swung the figurine with all her might, hitting him on the shoulder. Vic roared in pain and surprise. "You little Stevie, grab her!" Enraged, the men turned on the girl. Ellie became a wildcat. She bit, scratched, kicked, doing everything she could to keep them from reaching Chloe, who was cowering on the bed. Stevie grabbed Ellie by the hair, trying to pull her away, but she sank her teeth into his hand. Uncle Vic, losing all restraint, drew back his heavy fist. "I'll kill you right here," he bellowed. At that moment, as Ellie's strength was failing, Chloe began to choke in terror from the stress. From downstairs came a deafening crash, the front door being forced open, the house filled with shouts, the pounding of many feet, and sharp commands. "Everyone down! Armed response unit!" Men in black tactical gear stormed into the room. Uncle Vic and Stevie were thrown to the floor and had their arms pinned behind their backs in an instant. Following them, James Harrington burst into the children's room. His face was white as snow. He rushed to the bed, scooping the fading Chloe into his arms, then turned to Ellie. The girl sat on the floor, her face scratched, the sleeves of her jumper torn, but her eyes still blazed with the fierce fire with which she had protected another woman's child. After the intruders were led away, police officers remained in the house, documenting the damage and listing the items the burglars had managed to take. While the police worked in the children's room, the household gathered in the living room. On the sofa sat Margaret. She was very pale and kept pressing a bag of frozen peas from the freezer to her forehead. Her hands trembled noticeably, but when she saw the girls, relief and joy flickered in her eyes. She tried to smile, though the corner of her mouth twitched nervously. "Alive, thank God. Alive," the housekeeper whispered. James Harrington stood by the window, breathing heavily. His jacket was unbuttoned, his tie askew. He slowly turned to Ellie, his gaze sharp with prickly suspicion. "How did they find the address?" His voice was sharp as a whip. "Alexandra, those were your family. You led them here. You thought you could make an easy profit." Ellie froze, gripping the back of the sofa in the middle of the room. Her face burned with indignation. Her split lip throbbed again. She wanted to answer, but her throat constricted. At that moment, a police officer entered the living room. "Mr. Harrington, look at this." He held out a clear evidence bag. "We found this in one of the detainees' pockets." The man took the bag and looked at its contents. Inside was his own business card, the expensive one with gold embossing. It was crumpled, stained with dried brine and gray road dirt, but perfectly legible. James Harrington stared at it for a long time. Ellie watched his face change. The tension in his jaw eased. The anger in his eyes was replaced by a heavy, genuine shame. He understood. Yesterday, he had dropped this card in the mess of smashed jars and cucumbers, right at the girl's feet. "They must have picked it up on the roadside," he said hoarsely. "Forgive me, Ellie, I'm ashamed. I shouldn't have thought that." He took out his phone and unlocked the screen. He stood in silence for a while, looking at it. "I saw through the app how they broke in," he said, still staring at the screen. "How they smashed the cameras in the hall and kitchen. Then the feed went dead. I called the rapid response team immediately." He paused, then looked at Ellie, his eyes shining. "One camera survived, the one in Chloe's room. I just watched the footage. You stood your ground, Ellie. You didn't give my daughter to those monsters. You risked your life for her." The housekeeper spoke up. "She saved little Chloe twice in 2 days. I think that's fate. We couldn't find a better nurse if we tried, Mr. Harrington." Chloe, who had been standing by Ellie, hugged her savior. The rich man watched them, his eyes moist. "Ellie, stay with us," he said. "I don't need someone with a diploma in this house. I need someone with a heart. Stay. You'll be Chloe's official carer, with a good salary and all your rights. And Chloe, I can see, won't let you go." "I won't," the girl confirmed, hugging her friend tighter. Ellie looked at Chloe, then at Margaret, who nodded approvingly, and finally at the master of the house. "I won't abandon you," she said quietly. "Where else would I go?" Several months passed. One evening, James Harrington gathered everyone in the living room and laid a folder of documents on the table. "Well, it's all done," he said. "The court has passed the sentence. Ellie, your grandmother, and her whole gang have been given prison terms, and your aunt and uncle have been formally stripped of custody over you. Since you're only 15, I've legally become your guardian. Until you come of age, I am your legal representative." Chloe, sitting beside Ellie, raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Dad, what does that mean? Is Ellie going to be my big sister now?" Her father looked at the two girls, who had become inseparable over the months, and nodded. "Effectively, Elizabeth, that's exactly what it means." The girls looked at each other and hugged in delight. "Chloe, do you hear that? We'll be together forever," Ellie whispered joyfully. The complicated words in the documents didn't matter to them. What mattered was that they were now a family. Time passed, and life in the house transformed. With determination and the help of tutors, Alexandra caught up on her missed schooling within 2 years and was accepted into university. She blossomed, growing confident. Elizabeth changed too. She started attending a regular school. Her heart grew significantly stronger, thanks not only to modern medicine and a timely operation, but also to a life without stress and daily walks with Ellie in the fresh air. James Harrington often caught himself thinking that he was completely happy. In the evenings, watching his two beautiful, intelligent, and close daughters chatting at the table, he felt a surge of pride. "Chloe, Ellie, dinner is ready," Margaret called from the kitchen. The master of the house felt calm about their future. He knew that on that freezing winter evening on the roadside, He hadn't just found a random helper. He had found a second daughter for his small family. The little stray dog was no longer alone. She had finally found those who appreciated and loved her for who she was,